Today, we're talking about plant this and not that, a smart way to avoid invasive plants in your garden. Spring rolled into my town this week with trumpets blaring, birds singing, and warm, sunny days. And of course, as gardeners, you know what that means. It's time to go plant shopping. But before you go shopping, it's best to make a plan. Think of your garden as a blank slate. How you fill it up depends on a lot of decision. If you've moved into a newly built house, this is what you may be facing as you start planning your garden. A lot of nothing and poor soil. Or maybe it's an older house that isn't really functional or pretty. Maybe it is immaculately landscaped, but just not your style. Or you bought a fixer-upper with way too much landscape. As gardeners, our joy is creating space that is beautiful to behold and nurtures our souls. As we plan for our gardens, there's a lot of questions we need to answer. My first step is always to find a vision for my landscape. What kind of garden makes you happy? Do you want a classic English garden with lots of flowers and a cottage feeling? Or how about a low maintenance landscape that requires minimal work? Maybe you like a lush, shady garden, or just maybe you want a complete privacy from your neighbors. Perhaps you're concerned about the climate change and want to create a garden that can take hot temperatures and need very little water. The plants we choose are all a reflection of the garden style we're going after. Maybe you have a garden problem that you want to solve. Instead of a lush shade garden, you have a bunch of weeds under a tree. And speaking of weeds, maybe you have nasty soil where weeds are happy to grow. Or you have a hot, dry yard that gets blasted by the western sun and has a weed-choked lawn. By the way, that last one is the house I moved into in 2012. Garden problems? Oh, so many. It's so easy to just go to a nursery and indulge in what I call speed dating for plants. You think, oh, that's gorgeous. Sun exposure and available moisture fit my yard somewhere, I'm sure. But it's so pretty, I have to have it. Here's a phrase that people from the medical field will recognize. First, do no harm. Most plant labels will tell you what the mature size of the plant, what kind of sun exposure and water it needs, but I've yet to see one that says, and oh, by the way, this plant is invasive and you is on the invasive plant list and in your area and may cause harm to landscapes and natural areas around you. And that's what we're tracking today. Many plants that are sold at nurseries today are actually on the state and local nuisance or invasive plant list. But what does that mean for you? We're going to look at how to tell whether a plant is a good choice for your garden, could be a nuisance, or can cause serious degradation of your ecosystem. We'll start by looking at plant classifications and hone in on how to properly name plants so you know what you're getting. You'll get resources that can help you identify the plants that are harmful, and then we'll have a show and tell of commonly available plants that are invasive but are sold online in nurseries and by landscapers. But here's the fun part. We'll also give you options that are beautiful and beneficial. Because a plant's invasive nature varies from location to location, we can't go into every plant that could cause harm. Today's objective is to encourage you to think about exactly what you're putting into your landscapes and making ethical choices to protect our ecosystems. A reminder, if you've registered, you will get an email with a link to this recording and a list of resources used in this talk. So don't worry about frantically taking notes. The Q&A team is here to answer questions as we go. But if we don't get to you, you can always email your questions to the link provided on your resource list. So let's get started. Defining the language. First, let's go over the plant classifications. I've chosen 4 photos of plants that I've had in my gardens: Oregon white oak, lavender, yellow flag iris, and California poppy. Wait, California poppy is a weed? We'll get to that in a bit. Defining a native plant is one that has evolved in an area over a long period of time. These are photos of Quercus garryana, Oregon white oak, or Gary oak, it can be called. and they are an iconic keystone species for my state. A keystone species is an organism that holds an ecosystem together, exerting a large influence on its environment relative to its abundance. Gary oak systems provide an incredible rich habitat for wildlife. The photo on the right is a good picture of a Quercus gariana savanna, a native ecosystem that is at the risk of extinction. The photo on the left is not a Gary oak and its natural oak savanna ecosystem. It's on a suburban lot in the Portland metro area and just over the fence from my backyard. It was here long before any of the houses surrounding it were built, but with careful construction techniques and designed to preserve the integrity of the root system and proper maintenance, it has survived and is an absolute gift to our city. The first takeaway for today: if you've got an important keystone plant in your life, cherish it. An ecoregion is a large area of the landscape with distinctive groupings of plants and animals and their interactions. There are 150 level 3 ecoregions in the continental United States. Each has its own soil, climate, native plants, and animals. The three I show right are good examples of the different plants that can grow in a specific region. The desert photo is of a garden created to mimic the landscape of Cesar Chavez as a child. Many of us have plants that speak to our hearts from childhood. This landscape is from my home in the Sierra Nevada foothills of California. I'm fortunate to live in a climate where these plants, the poppies, lupins, and oak trees, are also native in some form where I live today, so I am free to have them growing in my yard. Plants that have been introduced into an ecosystem are also called alien, exotic, or most commonly ornamental. They're chosen for their aesthetic appeal in gardens or homes for color and texture, and not for their ecological benefits. There are records of plants being introduced to the U.S. from the early 1700s. Many of them are still widely grown today, and many of them have become invasive. This ginkgo tree originated in East Asia and has fossil records dating back 170 million years. Another introduced plant is roses, for example. They're fairly easy to transport, and once established could remind one of home, and as we know, can be hybridized in spectacular fashion. Most of the ornamentals that we find today are not harmful to the environment. But hiking in the mountains of the West Coast, I was always delighted when I ran across a stand of foxgloves. I thought this was one of the most beautiful native plants I'd ever seen. I happily planted a grouping in my yard, only to find out it is not a West Coast native plant at all. It is listed as invasive in California and Oregon. Takeaway number 2, do your research before you plant. Let's define invasive. Invasive are plants that have been introduced into an ecosystem that causes or is likely to cause economic or environmental harm or harm to human health. I made this bouquet of lovely flowers from the yard of a house in Oregon City that was built in 1900. Because of their beauty and hardiness, they were introduced to the Pacific Northwest. Problem is, the butterfly bush, the Queen Anne's lace, and traveler's joy are all highly invasive. The map with the green area shows where the Queen Anne's lace has invaded natural areas, and the bottom map shows where it's listed as invasive or against the law to sell within the state. The Oregon Department of Agriculture prohibited the sale of non-approved selections of butterfly bush within the state of Oregon, and only approved sterile cultivars of butterfly bush may be legally sold. Clematis petalba, traveler's joy, was introduced as an ornamental plant in the Pacific Northwest sometime between 1950 and 1970, so it hasn't really been here that long. But it can grow up to 100 feet, and each plant can produce 100,000 seeds. It is now listed as invasive in California, and it is against the law to sell it in Oregon and in Washington. An invasive plant can also be referred to as a noxious weed. State and federal agencies designate particularly undesirable invasive plants as noxious weeds. Keep in mind, however, that an invasive plant may not be listed as officially noxious, even if it causes harm. It often takes a great deal of time to work through all the red tape before a plant is labeled invasive, and even longer for there to be state laws forbidding its sale. Invasive species have classifications ranging from invasive but not widespread to noxious species that are widely distributed and abundant throughout the region. The noxious classification is given to any plant designated by government as injurious. Distribution is already very extensive throughout the natural areas, and they are difficult to control once they become. And this is what happened when an invasive plant that has become a noxious weed moves in. You can see the massive amount of ivy choking out the tree, and ivy and blackberry in the foreground. Any plants native to this region don't stand a chance. The man on the right is holding the trunk of ivy that he just cut down off of a big leaf maple. Look at the size of that trunk. This is Acer macrophyllum, the species that was covered by ivy in the previous slide. Big leaf maple is a keystone species in the Pacific Northwest, a high-value habitat tree. Its flowers provide nectar for bees and hummingbirds, while squirrels and birds relish its seeds. The bark's ability to retain moisture makes it a host for the licorice fern, and it is a larval host plant for 238 species of butterflies and moths. English ivy and other noxious weeds are smothering natural areas throughout the Pacific Northwest, including our big leaf maple forests. A weed is a plant out of place. We often think of weeds as herbaceous plants that we'll pull out of our garden beds, but trees can be weeds too. This European mountain ash has escaped ornamental plantings and is able to invade, integrate, and dominate plant communities. You can see from the map that it has invaded the natural areas of many states, but is only listed as invasive, as noxious in 5 states. What's a weed and what's not a weed? The California poppy. While this plant is native to the West Coast, and one of my personal favorites, it's growing in a sidewalk where it can become a trip hazard. So it could be called a weed, a plant not growing where it's not wanted. The purple dead metal is native to Eurasia and is considered a weed by many people caring for lawns. But it is one that is a good example that is naturalized, but it's really not considered invasive. The hairy bittercress is not native to the United States, and every gardener I know considers it an invasive weed. It has been reported that bittercress plants are capable of producing over 5,000 seeds, and most of which can germinate within 2 weeks and start the process all over again. And yet, in the invasive plant atlas of the United States, there is no reference that they have this list the species as invasive in North America. I think gardeners may disagree. It can be so confusing. So let's learn about resources that can guide us in landscape design. I've always loved gardening and have had the joy of creating many gardens over the decades. When we moved into our current house, I was desperate to start making it pretty. I thought I was a good gardener, but I found out that I didn't know what I didn't know. A few years after we moved in, and after we had made some really poor choices in plant selection, we started going for native habitat certification with the Backyard Habitat Program in Portland, Oregon. Our gardening practice were revolutionized, and over the years, I've learned so many national programs that offer advice, planting plans, and education to help restore local ecosystems in ways that are easy to follow by the average homeowner. These days, most of the invasive plants that are threatening our ecosystems are brought to us by the nursery trade. Deliberate introductions of ornamentals are the primary source of invasive plants in the United States. All of the plants listed here are considered invasive in the Portland, Oregon area. Take a look at the invasion curve. The population of a typical invasive species is slow to increase, but then it explodes. And check out where public awareness comes in on the growth curve. Yikes. The chart suggests that by the time the public really starts to notice an invasive species, there's a good chance we miss the boat. Think of Himalayan blackberries, Canada thistle, and our ever popular English ivy. Invasive plants are one of the 5 major drivers of global diversity loss. If we want to search for information about a specific plant that we might be considering for our garden, it's important to find out the botanical name to get accurate information. Biological organisms such as plants are given 2 Latinized names, the Latin binomial or so-called scientific name. And the first name represents the genus, and the second name is termed the specific epithet that denotes a descriptive addition to a name. Thus, each species has a 2-part name. For example, the tree species that is commonly known in North America as bigleaf maple has been given the Latin binomial of Acer macrophyllum that translates to big leaf. Appropriate since the leaves can measure up to 12 inches across. The cultivar Seattle Sentinel on the right is a cultivated variety with a narrow, upright columnar shape, making it more suitable for landscapes. But here's the deal. I am absolutely terrible at pronouncing most of the Latin names, so I'll be using the common name most of the time, but the Latin name will always be on the slide so you will know what the specific plant I'm talking about. Deal? And doesn't it seem like a bit of a pain to use these hard to pronounce Latin phrases? Sticking with maple trees. When my husband and I moved to purchasing our plants for our newly home, we wanted some colorful trees that would shade the front of our home from the western sun in the summer. Our first thought was maple. We knew that many varieties have beautiful fall color and could grow to be a good size, so we went tree shopping and came home with a red maple and a Norway maple. Well, there are 8 different cultivars of red maple listed in the OSU directory of landscape plants, all of them having a little different growth habit. They're lovely trees, but they are notorious for having shallow, spreading roots, something we didn't know before we bought them. And guess what? When I applied for the backyard habitat certification, I found out that the Norway maple is on the noxious weed list in my city and can spread rapidly and are difficult to control once they become widespread. So the tree at the left in the picture above was taken down 5 years after we planted it. That was a gigantic waste of time and money. So now we're going to do step 2 in our learning cycle. Identify your resources. You want to know a smart way to avoid invasive plants in your garden? Do the research. Look at the commonly sold plants that cause damage to your ecosystems. Often in our enthusiasm to create beautiful gardens, we don't do the homework to find the plants that will be both beautiful, ecologically beneficial, and cost-effective. It's easy to see why plants that are potentially invasive are also really attractive to the horticultural trade. The virtues of plants can also be a warning sign. These characteristics include easy to grow in any soil, can take care of itself, survive 6 years of drought unattended, hardly ever disturbed by pest or disease, and tolerant of salt drift. This is a native tree that we planted to replace this is not a native tree. This is the tree that we planted to replace the Norway maple. It's a Nyssa sylvatica cultivar called Firestarter. The common name is black gum or tupelo. It is native to the eastern United States from Maine to Florida. It was one of the trees featured in the 10-Minute University Best Garden Trees Talk webinar, an excellent resource if you're planning to add a tree to your garden. Making wise choices for your garden does not always mean you have to go with plants native to your area. Finding a plant that meets your garden's environmental constraints and has the visual impact you desire and is not harmful to your ecosystem, well, it's just a matter of research. Thank goodness for the internet. So I wanted to find out the most efficient way to figure out what plant was considered invasive in any location in the United States. I reached out to the weedwise manager of the Clackamas Soil and Water Conservation District. His first response was, "That is a really complex topic." Well, it turns out there is no one website that gives the invasive status for any plant, any place. But he gave me several lists to explore, and this is the one I found most helpful on a national scale. It's easy to type into your web browser. Invasive.org is all you need, and it will take you directly to this. It's run by the University of Georgia and Bugwood.org. It lists invasive lists by federal and state locales with links to useful maps that show where an invasive plant is listed or prohibited. It links to bugwood.org, which has an incredible searchable library of plant photographs. So if you're trying to identify something, this is a great place to start. It also has links to EDD maps, which is the Early Detection and Distribution Mapping System. And it has maps of where species are as being present and as separate maps that list what states and provinces it has either listed as invasive or prohibited for sale. And those are the maps that you've been seeing earlier in the presentation. I've just shown a screenshot of the plants section, but it also has a long listing of insects, pathogens, and wildlife. Because government is not always as speedy as we'd like it to be, and there are many stakeholders that are affected by government enlisting plants as invasive or prohibiting sales, it takes a little research to make really wise choices. This is an example of the statewide weed monitoring organization in Oregon. This will give you more specific regional invasive weed information, and plants that are listed as invasive in Northwest Oregon can be very different from those in Eastern Oregon. Each state has its own ecoregions, so check out the resources in your state. These two books are ones that I refer to constantly. The Native Plants for the Willamette Valley Yards is small enough that I can keep it in my purse when I go plant shopping. The Portland Plant List has 202 pages of in-depth profile of each native plant and a list of invasive plants in the back. It is available as a free download. Again, these are just examples of what's available in my area. Each region will have its own organizations and literature. In classifying invasive plants, different organizations use nomenclature that varies, but in general, a W is for watch list. These weeds display invasive qualities in an area or similar ecosystems but have not yet proven to be problematic. Class A weeds, the first class of weeds, is marked for early detection. Class B is high importance. These can be locally abundant, but may also occur in spotty distribution across the landscape. Management focuses on the eradication of small, isolated populations and control or containment of larger infestations. Then we get to Class C, weeds that are common. These weeds occur across the landscape at a level where eradication, containment, or control is not feasible. Management focuses on removing them from ecologically, socially, and economically important sites and slowing their spread through prevention actions. I love being able to search the internet for the information as I need it. As I was researching wonderful plants that are alternative to invasives, I came across a site that had listed the 15 best evergreen ground cover plants. Cool. So I went there, and this is the list that was presented. I plugged each of these names into the invasive.org website, and 7 of the 15 are listed as invasive in at least one state. The 2 that really stood out were the English ivy and the Euonymus fortunei. See, I told you I couldn't say Latin. Common winter creeper. The dark red coloring means it's prohibited to be sold, and the salmon color means it is listed as invasive in those states. The map with the green coloration shows where it has escaped into the wild. And if a plant is not invasive, the website will say, for example, the phlox. No reference that we have lists this as species as invasive in North America. This species is included for comparison to other species that are considered invasive. Takeaway number 3, use reliable government or academic sources for your information. There are many ways invasives get into your garden, but the plants we bring home from the nursery is the one that we can really control. Starting number 3, sorting out what plants we can use. Get the plant list of invasives and alternative plants and ornamental plants. The plan of attack is to profile plants found in nurseries or commonly seen in yards that are invasive. Identify the role that they play in the landscape, and then detail both native and ornamental plants that achieve that role and are safe for the environment. Let's start with trees. Okay, the tree of heaven grows in dense clonal thickets. It's extremely tolerant of poor soil conditions. It can even grow in cement cracks. As you can see, it is listed as unlawful to sell in many states. It is not likely that you're going to find this in a nursery, but it is likely that you may find it creeping up in your yard because of its invasive nature. The Callery pear is reported as established outside cultivation in 25 states in the United States, sometimes forming dense thickets. The small fruit are eaten by birds that then disperse viable seeds beyond the original area. There are many sterile cultivars of Callery pear, and individual cultivars themselves are not invasive, but the combination of cultivars within an area creates a situation in which invasive plants can be produced. The European birch or cutleaf birch is a very popular tree for its dramatic white bark and beautiful weeping habit. The tree pictured here was in my backyard when we purchased our house. We had to remove it in 2019 due to an infestation of birch bark borer. It was replaced with the keystone species bigleaf maple. The map inset shows where it was invaded by where it has invaded wild areas, but it is not necessarily on the invasive list yet. When you are researching your plants, take a look at the early detection and distribution mapping system. If you see green sections all around where you live, think 3 times before adding it to your private little ecosystem. Here are the 3 terrific plants that will add beauty and wildlife value to your yard. The vine maple. It's a beautiful broadleaf deciduous tree that can get spectacular fall color, and it grows in both shade and sun. The cascara tree can grow to 50 feet tall, or it can be a shrub up to 15 feet tall, depending on the amount of moisture it gets and the amount of sun or shade, but it grows well in both. The Pinus contorta, commonly called lodgepole pine, has 4 different varieties. They can be really tall trees, 3 of them, but the subspecies, Pinus contorta variety contorta, tops out from 20 to 50 feet. The trunk is often twisted, and the crown shape varies from being dense and round to very irregular. It's drought tolerant and occurs in extreme habitats that are unfavorable to other potentially competitive species. These are the trees that would adapt well to small yards, but if you've got room, a big leaf maple is a great choice for the ecosystem, and you live in the West Coast. Or if you've got room and patience, try an Oregon white oak. Now for ornamentals. The Japanese maple has been hybridized into so many leaf color shapes and structural diversity, it would be hard to not find a plant that you could happily bring home and treasure for years to come. Now here's something that really surprised me. It has escaped and is naturalized in the eastern United States. Widespread use of this plant increases the probability that more will escape from cultivation. It is listed as invasive in Pennsylvania, Delaware, New Jersey, and Virginia. Again, even though a plant is widely popular nationwide, it may have escaped cultivation in some areas and become invasive. Always check. The tupelo or black gum, a lovely tree that is native to Missouri, but considered ornamental in the rest of the United States. The glossy dark green leaves and brilliant fall color make it a sight to behold. The Stewartia pseudocamellia is breathtaking with its camellia summer blooms and vibrant fall colors. And here's an evergreen tree to consider. The locust tree not only gives you great form, textured leaves, and fall flowers, but in the right conditions can give you edible fruit as well. Hedges and shrubs. There are so many gorgeous native and ornamental hedges and shrubs to choose from. I just really don't understand why people keep putting in the same invasive plants. You've seen it. That wall of green sheared every year to an unnatural growth pattern or flat sides and straight top. Why choose something that is invading out natural areas and causing harm when there are so many good choices? Here are three shrubs that are very common in my area that are considered invasive or even noxious. The English holly is always a staple in Christmas decor. In fact, the Portland area has quite the holly for Christmas industry. It's listed as a state invasive weed, and the Solve Pest Problem from Oregon State University website provided this risk card. It lists the risk factors of invasive plants and if action should be taken. The cherry laurel is everywhere in my area. The flowers are kind of stinky, in my opinion, and it takes a lot of maintenance to keep it in check. A neighbor of mine just added 30-foot row to their existing 100 plus feet of cherry laurel. It's readily available in nurseries, but look at the risk involved with this species. The butterfly bush can be a real eye catcher and it does attract butterflies, but it does not really help them. Butterflies in adult form live a very short time, and this is kind of like fast food from a drive-in. It's not used as a larval plant, and there are plenty of better food sources for butterflies that will also provide food for hungry caterpillars. However, it is well liked by many for the pretty flowers and the butterfly attractions, so researchers are working on breeding sterile hybrids that theoretically will be safer for the environment. The Pacific wax myrtle. It's the classification has been changed from Myricus to Morella in the past few years. It often takes a few years for labels on nursery plants to catch up, so look for either. This beauty is native to the Pacific coast and coastal valleys from Washington to California. It can grow 10 to 12 feet, and it can be sheared to make a uniform hedge, at least as far as your ladder will reach. The toyon was in my garden when I lived in the Sierra Nevada foothills. It is up to 15 to 20 feet high at maturity and hardy to zone 7. The berries are beautiful in winter and a nice alternative to English holly berries. And please notice, no stickery leaves. It can be left to its natural form, or it can be pruned as a hedge or a tree. This is a powerful house plant for wildlife. The Oregon grape has yellow flowers that are the first to appear and a delight for early season bees. If you like blue orchard mason bees, this is the plant for you. It grows 3 to 10 feet tall in partial to full shade, and it prefers moist soil. Native from British Columbia to Oregon, it can get leggy. There are cultivars that are more compact and with some nice leaf color variation. Moving on to good hedgerow plants that are happy in full sun and will take drought, but inland maybe like a little bit of shade and some summer water. The first is the manzanita. The natural hybrid features here is Dr. Hurd. It's an evergreen shrub to a small tree, 6.5 to 25 feet tall. Native to California, North Coast Range, foothills of the Cascades and Sierra Nevada mountains, and San Francisco Bay Area. It's fast growing in full sun and is becoming a really popular plant to put into the Portland area because of its ability to take heat and drought. How? Talk about getting a bang for your buck. The ceanothus is a broadleaf evergreen shrub, 4 to 12 feet and up to 20 feet tall. It's stiff, upright, and spreading, and hardy to 15 degrees. When we had a major deep freeze in Portland, my ceanothus took a real hit, and I was afraid I had lost it. But within a year, it had bounced back and looked gorgeous. There are many species and cultivars that range from low-growing ground cover types to large, impressive shrubs, and blooming from March to July. The Grevillea, I do not have this plant in my garden, but I have the perfect spot for it. It's going to help hide my neighbor's English laurel hedge. But it can be cold sensitive, but it has a really beautiful kind of grayish leaf, and those flowers are spectacular. The Osmanthus goshiki. I bought 5 of these one year for winter containers where I worked. They were a nice small thriller, and then I brought them home and have planted them in several areas in my yard. Full sun, part shade, full shade. The shrubs in part shade are the ones you see here, and they get summer water occasionally. This plant can grow to 10 feet tall, but it is not a fast grower. I keep them pruned down so they don't cover up the window. The ones in full sun and in full shade are much slower growing, though neither gets much summer water. They've survived a week-long ice storm and temps of 115 degrees during the heat dome a few years ago. No problem. They're hardy to zone 6 and they're native to Japan. The Pieris japonica, I have heard it called Andromeda a lot. It is a broadleaf evergreen shrub, can grow 5 to 6 feet tall, it says in the literature, but I have one that's a good 10 feet tall in my yard. Um, it's slow to average growth rate and it's dense. The flowers are rose pink and drooping colors, oftentimes white. It takes sun to part shade, and it's responds to being fertilized, especially in high rainfall areas. There are 2 areas that I see rampant invasive plants: hedges, which we just talked about, and ground covers. A good ground cover can suppress weeds and add a finished, cohesive look to a garden. However, many ground covers that are everywhere are also noxious weeds or invasive. I mean, they are everywhere, not only because we've planted them, but they got loose and took over. Ivy is an aggressive invader that we talked about, threatening all levels of forested and open areas, growing along the ground as well as into the forest canopy. Vinca minor. This was kind of a little heartbreaker for me. I love periwinkle, and it's one of my favorite colors, but it inhabits open to shady sites, including forest, and it often escapes from old home sites. It's been around a long time. It grows vigorously and forms dense and extensive mats along the forest floor, displacing native herbaceous and woody plant species. It was introduced to North America in the 1700s, and it's still commonly sold as an ornamental ground cover. St. John's wort. You can see by the red portion on the inset how widespread this is in Oregon. This is one of the plants that the Latin name is really important. There are many beautiful species of Hypericum, 2 of them as native plants in the Portland plant list, but it's the perforatum part that is so crucial to identifying if this is a plant that you need that you want in your yard or not. And the answer is no. Kinnikinnick. Yes, there are 2 ways to spell it, and I put them both there. This is an evergreen ground cover that grows 6 to 12 inches tall, and the branches root where they touch the soil, and it's mat forming. It has beautiful exfoliating bark on older stems, and it's, sorry, uh, lovely for the berries and the flowers. There we go. Okay, native strawberries. We have 3 varieties available to us. All of them form good ground cover. They've got flowers, they've got berries that the birds and critters like. And the beach strawberry is an evergreen. And so that's a real plus. And you can keep these looking more lush, but you take a lawnmower and cut them back every year or so. The Pacific waterleaf is grows in sun or part shade. It is evergreen, but if it doesn't get any summer water, it can dry bad. I love the picture with the water leaf and the sword fern. That's just such a lovely woodland look. Okay, Oregon grape, creeping mahonia, creeping Oregon grape, and longleaf mahonia. They're both good evergreen ground covers. The native ranges from British Columbia to California and eastward to the Rocky Mountains and in the Black Hills of South Dakota. The Mahonia nervosa, the Cascade Mahonia on the right, is one of our Northwest native plants. Its suckering shrub forms a loose ground cover with lustrous emerald leaves and panicles of canary flowers in May and waxy blue berries in autumn. The creeping Oregon grape is another lower growing ground cover. I like the shape of the leaves a lot, and I really love the color that they turn in the winter. They're great for when you're trying to do uh, native plants in difficult situations. It's great for parking strips and parking lot planting beds or your garden. Salal, oh my heart. I have a large section of my front yard devoted to salal. I appreciate it for its beauty, but also for the wildlife it brings in. It's always active with birds, and more recently, tiny brush bunnies have taken up residence. By the way, I found out they do love hostas. Um, this is actually a terrific weed suppressor in my front yard. The only thing that gets through the salal is the Canada thistle, but otherwise, I don't have any weed problems at all. It can take over and choke out some other plants that I want, but I can live with that. The ornamental, the creeping raspberry is considered aggressive but not invasive. It will not climb trees or smother nearby shrubs, and it can be managed easily with an edger. I have this growing in full shade under a big leaf maple and in the full sun in a bed in front of my kitchen window. It does great in both places. Okay, vines. Let's look at a few invasive vines. One you're unlikely to find in a nursery, but it may very well be creeping up in your garden. And the other is a plant I think with of great fondness from childhood and was a bit heartbroken to find out that it is listed as invasive in many states, including Oregon. The old man's beard or traveler's joy is perennial, rapidly growing woody vine that can grow up to 100 feet long and completely blanket surrounding vegetation. It's found along streams, fence lines, forest edges, and hillsides, and in your garden. The Japanese honeysuckle, this is the one that broke my heart. I mean, what kid doesn't remember pulling off the back end of that flower and drinking the nectar? Um, who didn't? Sorry, a wide variety of habitats, including forest floors, canopies, and roadsides. So here are some alternate choices. In our Oregon or in the Pacific Northwest, we have two native honeysuckles, the pink honeysuckle and the orange honeysuckle. Both will go in sun to shade and dry to moist, and they reach about 20 feet. The clematis, oh, the choices you have in clematis other than the traveler's joy or the old man's beard. We're lucky enough to have the Rogerson Clematis collection here in the Portland metro area, and they've got so many beautiful, beautiful plants and knowledge to share with you. If you want a climbing vine that's ornamental and good for you, go visit them. Grasses are the next on our list. I'm not going to go into a lot of detail, but you do have to be very careful of what you buy. Again, check it out carefully. I have a friend who just was so excited because he bought some pampas grass to put in his new yard. And I just kind of had to bite my tongue because I thought that's really not a good idea. Um, so, anyway, these are some of the ones that are most invasive. And here are some choices that you can make that are not as invasive or not, I'm sorry, not invasive at all. I just love this Japanese forest grass with the little fish involved in it. That's just a really cute way to do things. Flowers. When you choose flowers to plant in your yard, there are so many great choices. So the Japanese knotweed, as you can see in the map, has just become a vicious invasive plant. But the goat's beard, or and this is a name I just found out today, it can be called bride's feathers, which is so much lovelier than goat's beard, is a great alternative. The green and gold plant is great for replacement for lesser celandine. I had a house up in Bellingham that had yellow flag iris in it when I moved there. And I was told, well, you have to pull that out. And I thought, why? It's free, it's beautiful, it's growing well. And then I learned more about native plants and invasiveness, and yeah, it had to go. There's so many irises that you can get to replace that system in your yard. Purple loosestrife, you will most likely not find it in a nursery, but you will most likely find it uh, in nature. And if you see a infestation of it, it's best to call your local weed board, and they can often sometimes go out and take care of it. It's just a constant problem. The fireweed is a native to our area and does kind of the same function in terms of the look. And these are ones that volunteered in my yard, and I love them dearly. Okay, let's take it a little bit further and choose plants that benefit pollinators and explore garden styles with your new awareness of native and ornamental plants. So the Garden Ecology Lab at Oregon State University is doing fascinating research on the richness and diversity of bee species in some key pollinator plants. Many native bees are specialists and need specific flowers to thrive. Other bees, like honeybees and bumblebees, are generalist and they really aren't that picky. One of the things I took away from this particular study was the farewell to spring, the Clarkia. I had never planted it before, but in looking at their research, I found out that leafcutter bees were particularly fond of Clarkia. So I went and I planted some uh, last year, and lo and behold, the leaf mining bees came. And it was so fun to watch them land on the flower, nibble away a piece of it, and take it off to make home a little attic room for their eggs. If you want to plant flowers for pollinators, plant flowers that are rich in nectar and pollen and that have different methods. All pollinators have different methods of collecting nutrition. And so planting a variety of shapes, sizes, and heights will provide a rich buffet for many pollinators. Making conclusions, number 5 on our inquiry learning cycle. You can have the garden style you want without using invasive plants. It's always good to go native, and it's more cost effective to do it right the first time. You have the option of choosing plants that support diversity and never use invasive species in your landscaping. Until you're able to rid your garden of invasive plants, be responsible and remember to remove and destroy seed heads before they can spread. Also, never propagate invasives or share cuttings from invasives with other gardeners. Here are a few examples of vastly different garden styles that really makes a visual impact and are creative mixes of both ornamental and native plants. Takeaway number 1. If you've got an important keystone plant in your life, cherish it. Takeaway number 2. Check the name of the plant carefully. Takeaway number 3. Use reliable governmental or academic sources for your information. Takeaway number 4 is be patient. So this was my yard when we started, and this is what it looks like now. That's a 12-year process. Lots of mistakes made along the way. Oh, let me go back to that one more time. I wanted to point out that you can have create hedgerows for privacy, With a mix of plants, you don't need a monoculture of one kind of plant. So as you can see, there's a house on the right here in this photo. When I stand in my yard, I can't see it at all because I have a privacy hedge of all of these native plants and ground covers. So think outside the box on some of that. Okay, taking actions. How are you going to use this information today? Define the plants that you want. Then you're going to do your research. You're going to check them out for invasiveness, and then you're going to go shopping. But at the nursery, check the tags for the Latin name. And if you're in doubt about whether it will be a good plant and a healthy plant for your ecosystem, the invasive.org website works really well on your phone's browser. I tried this and it just pops right up, very easy to use. And here are some of the resources, both national and local to the Oregon, that are really helpful. You will get these with in a printed list when you get the recording of the webinar. If you're thinking about trees, I highly recommend looking at the 10-Minute University Best Garden Trees. It was really helpful. And again, invasive.org. If you need more help, send photos and questions to Master Gardeners for identification and help. And if we didn't get your question answered today, follow up by sending your question and any photos to 10-Minute University 2017 at gmail.com. All the webinars recordings are available at the Clackamas County Master Gardeners website. And remember, if you register ahead of time, you receive a link to the video recording and a list of resources used in today's presentation. And I hope you register and check out the Dazzling Dahlias webinar next week. Go and make good choices.
Well, that
Okay,
was lovely and
thank
so
you.
appropriate. I'm going to ask you a quickie question. When you moved into your house in Lake Oswego area, what was the biggest invasive problem you faced when you were looking at that house?
It was ivy and blackberry.
Okay, so you had
And
to.
the blackberry, so the house was had been lived in by squatters and nothing had been done to the yard or anything. And the blackberry was just like 15 feet wide along the property lines throughout the entire thing. It took us years to get it out.
Ugh,
Um, and they still keep creeping in because birds. Uh, so
right. Birds
it's a
will carry
constant, yeah,
things.
checking.
Yeah,
Yeah, yeah.
absolutely. Okay, so we did have some wonderful questions, and I think many of us have moved and faced challenges in the yard. Like, for example, there's an enormous laurel hedge existing. So the question always becomes, do I rip it out? I will tell you, I love that you said evergreen blackberry was, or am I saying this right? Huckleberry, evergreen huckleberry is a wonderful, wonderful hedge. It is great for birds. It's easy to manage. It looks really natural,
It's
and it's a
so
wonderful
beautiful.
replacement for laurel.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah. I did have one question, and I know that many gardeners face this issue. And this person just said, I have blueberries in my yard. What do I do? Bluebells in my yard. What do I do about them? She did not specify whether they were English bluebells or Spanish bluebells. Do you have any advice for her?
Well, if she can figure out, again, invasive.org has terrific pictures to say this is a Spanish bluebell, this is an English bluebell. So figure that out. And the invasive kind, dig it out and replace it with something else. Now, there are plants that like Italian arum is becoming a really big problem and it's on the watch list for weeds in our area. Um, it's not easy
No.
to dig those out. So it's a period of often years, just oh, there it is, dig it out, there it is, dig it out. But it's one of the reasons you never start with them. It's just because it's just like you can't ever get rid of them. But with persistence, you can, and then replace it with a nice ground cover that's going to cover that
And
spot up.
basically, what you're doing is starving them of the
Yeah,
ability to reproduce. So just get after them, get after them, get after them.
yeah.
Don't give up. English bells that have existed for a time in a yard can be a challenge. And so before you plant that lovely new plant, one of which Leah showed you, make sure you get rid of all those before that happens.
Yeah.
Otherwise, they'll come up in the base of that lovely new plant you just bought. Somebody pointed out that the national database seemed confusing to them, and maybe some clarification on how the national database is organized. It is organized by geographical area, correct? Not from state to state to state.
Well, what the invasive.org website, and I wish I had time to kind of walk you through how it works, but you can say, so it says here are invasive species in plants, animals, pathogens, whatever. So you click on plants, and then you can type in a search of both a common name or a Latin binomial, and it will pull up pictures with all of the different names in it. And so you can click on a picture, and that will take you to another portion of the website that says, okay, I want more information about this plant. And then it will give you the listing on that whole page of whether it's invasive and why it's considered invasive or noxious. And then down below, it gives you the maps of the green sections that say this is invaded natural areas, and then another map that says this is considered invasive or illegal. So
Great. Great.
I
You've
mean,
given
there's
that is
a
a
lot of information, and you can just wiggle around in there and find it all.
Okay,
That
so
help? I hope.
I guess that person's observation was it is not equal from state to state. For example, St. John's wort is considered invasive in Oregon and Washington, but Idaho does not list it as invasive because they delisted it. It was either under biocontrol or had naturalized in the area.
Oh,
So different states have different opinions about things, and you have to just
that's
double check.
exactly, and that's what the whole thing about all the ecoregions is. It's like it can be invasive here and not a problem someplace else. And so that was my
Right.
basic place to start. Yeah. I
Yeah.
My
It
sister lives
is.
in Ann Arbor, and I say, "Oh, plant this." She says, "Oh no, I can't plant that here."
It'll go
So it's just
crazy.
yeah.
Right. Right. I love that you talked about grasses. I do think we can all go down the merry road with grasses. They look so great. And I guess I've learned as because I'm getting older now, instead of putting it in the garden, put it in a pot first, see how it behaves.
Yeah.
And if you notice it cropping up elsewhere. So thank you for that.
I wish I'd had more time on those. I because I love them too, but
Yeah, there's nice grasses and there's naughty grasses,
yeah,
right? Cyclamen heterofolium. Do you know about that?
I don't.
It's the
Talk to
ivy
me.
leaf cyclamen. Okay. There is one person asked and wanted to know if this was a concern for them. And apparently it is in some places it can be a problem. So that's one to look into deeply before you let it release in your yard. Just be careful with like you suggested they do. Be careful. Do your homework before you plant these in your yard.
Yeah.
I wish I'd had this webinar before I planted a couple things in my yard that
Well, see,
I'm
oh
still
yeah. I
trying.
mean, that was and what I was saying. Do the research first because I've had to take out at great physical effort and expense so many things that I planted.
And you
Um,
paid for them.
yeah,
I
yeah.
know.
You
Ouch!
know,
It hurts twice. I know. One question we got that's just kind of a fun question. You know the soft caress Mahonia, a variety. It's a hybrid. Um, this person wanted to know, is it as valuable to wildlife as the native varieties of Mahonia?
a lot of times the cultivars are not as valuable, but again, it's kind of a case by case basis. The Garden Ecology Lab was looking at some hybrids, like with bees, and some of them that had been hybridized for a different plant color or something, were not as beneficial. Um, but others were. So again, it's a case by case basis.
Okay, good answer.
How's that for
Excellent
a
answer.
non-answer?
No, that was, I mean, it is true. You can't always, the nice thing about soft caress Mahonia, it tends to bloom a bit earlier than the native Mahonia, therefore providing a flower. But as you say, whether the flower has as much value to the pollinators as the native
Yeah.
plant, more study is required for
Yes.
that. And have you ever found salal to be an aggressive plant in your garden?
Yes. It is aggressive,
Yes.
but it is not invasive. And that's what I was trying to say. I planted several, plugs in 2017, 2018,
Uh-huh.
and it is now just covered the area. I have a small bit of lawn in the front yard, and it's trying to take over that. So, but yet when I planted it in the backyard at the same time, I have two plants that have barely moved at all.
Okay.
So
It's situational.
it's
Mhm.
situational. Yeah, I mean, and this is like, 100 feet away from each other. But yes, it can be very aggressive. And I put in a watering system and it totally ate the watering system. Fortunately, it
Oh,
doesn't need water anymore, but I just like
right.
all my little drip hoses are just like, yep, we're gone. So,
Oh,
um, you know, like,
I do understand that.
yes.
Yeah, yes, I do understand that. Wonderful, very informative
Well, thank
webinar
you.
on invasives. I just, as I said, I wish I'd seen it when I was a younger gardener, but maybe I
It's
wouldn't have listened. I probably thought I knew it all.
yeah. Yeah, it's really complex and there's no like real easy answers. So, but the research is out there. You can find it.
And
So,
you gave us some wonderful resources. So
thank
now
you.
we can look those up and not make the same mistakes going
Enjoy.
forward.
Yeah.
And a
Okay.
reminder to everybody, Dazzling Dahlias next Wednesday. Go to cmastergardeners.org to register for that webinar. And thanks so much for joining us today. If you have additional questions, please send them with a detailed description and a picture to the Zoom, the webinar or the, hang on, I'm going to get this all out to the link in the Zoom confirmation. It will get to the right place, and Leah can answer the question for you.
Yes, sounds good.
All right.
Thank
Thank
you.
you, everybody. See you next week.
Bye.
Bye.